Good afternoon. I'd like to call the meeting of the Board of Public Utilities for the City of Santa Rosa to order. We may have a roll call, please.
Board Member Wright?
Here.
Board Member DeWitt?
Present.
Board Member Bartholow? Board Member Badenfort is absent. Vice Chair Arnone?
Here.
And Chair Galvin?
Here.
Let the record reflect that all board members are present with the exception of Board Member Badenfort.
Thank you. Any statements of abstention by board members? Seeing none, we have no study session. We have one presentation, item 5.1. Director Burke.
Thank you, Chair Galvin and members of the board. We have a presentation today from Sonoma Water on their water transmission system capital projects update, and Kent Gilfie, Director of Engineering at Sonoma Water, will be presenting.
I think you need, is your microphone on?
Let's try that. Good afternoon. We really appreciate the opportunity of being here to present today. I am Kent Gilfie, Director of Engineering for Sonoma Water. I am joined by a couple of my colleagues, Brad Sherwood, who is our Assistant General Manager over our Business Services and External Affairs, and Mr. David Royal, who's our Assistant General Manager over Operations and Maintenance. And again, really do appreciate the opportunity to be here today and present. We appreciate a lot of the city's leadership and collaboration with Sonoma Water on water supply issues that we'll be speaking about today. Appreciate Natalie Rogers' chair leadership with our WAC, and certainly Jennifer Burke in chairing the TAC for the Water Advisory Committee. So it is that time of year that Sonoma Water is typically beginning to prepare for our upcoming budget and rate discussions with the water contractors, with the Water Advisory Committee and the Technical Advisory Committee. That's going to be occurring in the weeks and months ahead. To that end, our finance folks are currently working hard to compile the information necessary for those discussions and to help determine what next year's recommended rates will be, and to provide the tax finance subcommittee in mid-January information for those discussions. And following that, after those discussions, we do hope in March to be able to present that information to interested water contractor boards and councils to go into those financial aspects in more detail. But ahead of those discussions, we're just taking the opportunity now to share with any interested water contractor boards and councils some of Sonoma Water's current transmission system projects and related efforts, and highlight some of Sonoma Water's continuing efforts to maintain reliability and resiliency of our water transmission system that's serving your community. So again, really appreciate this opportunity. We are up there, okay. So I'm going to touch on some capital improvement projects and maybe a couple of maintenance and planning efforts that we're engaged in on our water, associated with our water transmission system. I won't be covering a lot of detail of these projects, some brief descriptions and background on them and their current status. I'm going to start with projects that are in various stages of construction or recently completed construction or about to start construction. So first, work is continuing on rehabilitating our 3 production wells in the Santa Rosa Plain. These wells are not routinely used in our day-to-day supply, but in times of exceptional need, like in a drought, they tend to be used more. However, due to some changed regulatory requirements associated with chlorine contact time, these wells were unfortunately not in production ahead of the last drought, and we found ourselves needing to rehabilitate them. During that drought, we were able to get the Todd Road well back into production during the drought, thanks to some heroic efforts of our staff. And we also managed to be able to secure a $6.9 million drought resiliency grant to help rehabilitate the other 2 plain wells that we have. not only rehabilitate them for production purposes, but also to include the capability to recharge groundwater with those wells as part of a proposed future aquifer storage and recovery program, storing available winter water for later use. So at Occidental Road well, we've completed installation of a new well there. That well is intended to improve the water quality issues compared to the existing well and sanding conditions that were occurring with the existing well. Design of the top side elements of that project, the pumping, the piping, electrical, instrumentation, and control work is out for advertisement right now with construction to commence in 2025. The second well there, the Sebastopol Road well, is further along. This project's under construction. We completed a portion of this construction while under emergency contracting during the drought proclamation until that proclamation ended, and then we had to step back and prepare complete engineering and contract documents to bid the remaining work. This past summer, we did lose a month or two, unfortunately, due to a damaged existing valve on the aqueduct, on our 48-inch aqueduct, requiring us to implement an urgent, unplanned shutdown of that aqueduct in order to repair it. So we now find ourselves wrangling with the weather to complete that project and maintain the project schedule. But we still do, by next summer, expect to have production capabilities ready for that well, and to be commencing the pilot testing for the aquifer storage and recovery elements. Most recently, we did receive some guidance from the State Water Board on how to pursue the water rights for diversion into storage for that well, so that was great to receive. And we're certainly appreciative of the city's coordination with us in being able to connect with the recycle water line to benefit some of the operations associated with that well. One of our more significant projects is our tank rehabilitation program. It's a 10-year, $80 million program addressing some long overdue recoating of our 18 storage tanks in our water transmission system, representing some 128 million gallons of storage. With this project, we are also replacing associated cathodic protection systems, evaluating seismic conditions, and making other minor modifications as needed. So the Castagna tank is a 12 million gallon tank. It's the southernmost tank in our system that was recently completed and returned into service in September. This tank was particularly satisfying to complete, as it did represent the removal of our last coal tar tank lining in our system, replaced with an epoxy-based interior coating system. So we were quite pleased with that. And under that same construction contract, we also just last month completed and put back into service our 6 million gallon Cotati 1 tank. One of our two largest tanks is our Cotati 3 tank. It's 18 million gallons in capacity. We recently opened bids on that contract and do intend to award that contract in January and expect to have it out of service for much of 2025 for recoating. So in addition to the interior and exterior coating work, the cathodic protection work, and other minor appurtenance modifications, things like ladders, vents, and overflows, we'll be retrofitting on this Cotati 3 tank the foundation ring, retrofitting it basically by widening it. There's a little detail up there of how they're doing that. To address a seismic deficiency that was identified in our seismic assessment, the existing tank is loaded eccentrically on the foundation that we are going to try to address. It is incidental work to the recoat work, but for a tank that has a diameter that's nearly the length of a football field at 280 feet, it is significant incidental work for the project. So moving past tanks and wells, we'll talk a bit about cathodic protection. Our aqueducts are constructed with passive cathodic protection or corrosion protection systems. They have reached the end of their useful life, mostly exhausted. We are replacing them with an impressed current system, installing rectifiers, imparting a small current into the pipe to prevent corrosion. Following some prior cathodic protection conversions on the Sonoma Aqueduct and the Petaluma Aqueduct, we're now currently advancing efforts on the Santa Rosa Aqueduct and our Russian River Katati intertie. And we've split that effort into 2 phases, with the smaller phase targeted to advertise in just a couple months here in February, and phase 2 a year later in 2026, as the phase 2 sites had more significant right-of-way and permitting challenges associated with them. And do also appreciate the city's coordination and work with us on right-of-way and encroachment permits for those projects. At our Wilford Booster Station, which is located along our Petaluma Aqueduct and Roner Park, we are updating the outdated electrical equipment, addressing some seismic vulnerabilities, and installing a redundant pump set for resiliency. While this pump station, when it's normally operated, generally pumps to the southern portion of our system, it does have a unique vital role, being our only pump station that allows us also to pump north into the Santa Rosa area from the south. This has been essential for us under certain conditions, such as when we've had portions of the aqueduct system that had to be shut down for construction or repair purposes. So it's a valued facility in that regard. This past June, we've pre-purchased equipment for that project, and the project's scheduled to advertise for construction in 2026. One slide that I don't have today, but I want to mention, is the Eli Booster Pump Station. It's been under contract, a construction contract with us for more than 2 years now, but we haven't yet been able to break ground on it due to the electrical gear procurement and delays associated with that. We finally now have a delivery date that's anticipated in this coming spring, so we expect to advance that project in construction this coming summer. It's a FEMA-funded resiliency project to replace electrical gear and protect it from flooding near Eli Road in Pengrove, Petaluma area. And I mention this project primarily just to only highlight one of the challenges that we continue to face, as I imagine the city is also facing in procuring electrical gear. Some supply chain challenges still remain for some equipment, but particularly the electrical gear. And this isn't our only project that's suffering through that. Some of the other capital projects that are in design are Bennett Valley Fault Crossing, where our Sonoma Aqueduct and Oakmont Pipeline traverse the Bennett Valley Fault Zone along Montgomery Drive near Spring Lake. So those images, the top image just being kind of general location there along Montgomery Drive at the base of the main dam for Spring Lake, along with a geophysical cross-section that depicts these fault traces that those pipelines traverse. So this project design is currently at 30%, and we intend to advertise construction on that. At this point, the current thinking is seeking FEMA funding to substantially pay for the construction of that, so that's likely in 2026 that we hope to be able to do that. Also, we've recently completed a feasibility study looking to address our outdated chlorine and pH treatment systems with a modernization project. We're kicking off the design of a multi-phase effort to implement upgrades that are necessitated by our aging infrastructure, some operational and other infrastructure changes that have occurred in our Wooler-Mirabel area over the years, and some newer regulatory compliance requirements being imposed. Also addressing the safety issues in converting away from chlorine gas. Also included in that project is addressing some high vulnerabilities for our 12 kV electrical system that serves the area that are subject to high vulnerability to fire, flood, and seismic hazards, liquefaction, lateral spread specifically. So this is a significant project both in scope and cost, constructing new sodium hypochlorite facilities at our Wooler site, our Mirabel site, as well as a new hypochlorite and pH control facility at our River Road facility in the general area. Perhaps some have participated in some tours that we've offered of our Wooler-Mirabel facilities. And if you haven't, that is a standing offer to any board members who wish to do so. And if you have, you've observed our rather dated system out there, particularly on the chlorination front, and facilities out there that date back to the 50s and are more than 60 years old. So It has certainly some significant challenges. I don't think I was going to progress there. The Wohler-Demuth project is a new emergency inventory storage facility to address inventory deficiencies for equipment and supplies that are needed to support emergency repairs following damage from a major hazard event such as an earthquake, flood, fire. This project's intended to be responsive to the related recommendations of that 2018-2019 grand jury report, Will There Be Water After an Earthquake? That Sonoma Water, along with all our water contractors, did respond to. For this project, design has been initiated. We are targeting summer of 26 to advertise that. And phase one of the Quanah-Ralphine Sonoma Booster Station pipeline, lastly there, that bullet, represents a small northern portion of a larger Quanah-Ralphine Sonoma Booster Station pipeline. Phase one will replace the existing aqueduct between the Ralphine tanks there at Spring Lake and a Sonoma Booster Station also there in the general vicinity of Spring Lake. This phase is being advanced ahead of the larger pipeline, the Quanah-Ralphine SBS pipeline, to address vulnerabilities of the 66-year-old portion of that pipe that crosses beneath Spring Lake and one end of a portion of the Spring Lake Dam. This is also being looked at concurrently with other planning efforts that we are engaged in for rehabilitation of our Central Sonoma Watershed project as a flood control project for seismic and hydraulic performance, so trying to do those planning efforts simultaneously. Phase two is of Phase two of that project is still several years out. That's the larger portion of the overall pipeline. But we did just recently secure a significant portion of the needed right-of-way easement, partnering with the city. Appreciate the city's collaboration with that as part of the Southeast Greenway acquisition that recently closed. We're very excited about that and really appreciate the city's work with us on that easement and commend the city staff and certainly the Greenway campaign on the acquisition of that former Caltrans right-of-way. On the maintenance side of things, we have been completing washout inspections of our tanks, including complete draining and cleaning of those tanks, along with minor repairs as needed. In addition to the general maintenance benefits of that work, these efforts are helping to identify the appropriate prioritization and scheduling of the tanks for the bigger tank rehabilitation recoating program that I spoke to earlier. Over the last couple of years, we completed 9 tanks, shown in the first few bullets here on this slide. Kewanna 1 tank is in progress right now and out of service, and you can see the additional 3 tanks there that are planned through next fiscal year. And this is just a summary showing the various tasks that were completed the last 2 fiscal years, those first 2 columns, and those that are planned in blue there in the remaining columns in the current and future fiscal years for the tank maintenance program. On the planning front, we are in the process of developing a comprehensive master plan for our water transmission system. It is a multi-year effort, and our consultant, Carollo Engineers, has completed the first task looking at baseline conditions, assessing facility information, looking at water supply agreements, condition assessments, long-range financial plans, and our capital improvement plan. In the current fiscal year, we'll also be working with the city and all the water contractors coordinating on looking at water demand projections, and our consultant will also be developing basis of cost information and project prioritization methodologies. Actual project identification and development will be the focus of next fiscal year. Other currently active planning efforts will also be used to inform this plan. One of those is our current seismic resilience planning with our consultant Infraterra, who's assessing service interruption potential and mitigation needs and strategies in our aqueducts, our storage facilities, and our collector wells. That study recently completed more than 50 cone penetration tests across our aqueduct system to better understand the potential effects, damaging effects of liquefaction from a major earthquake and where that is most likely to occur. The master plan is also going to incorporate applicable recommendations from actions coming out of the regional resiliency study that we've been conducting by Jacobs Engineering and in collaboration with the water contractors, assessing the resiliency of our combined systems as an interconnected regional system in view of an array of hazards that could threaten the water supply. So the comprehensive master plan is intended to be completed in fiscal year 26-27 and help us to be able to better project our infrastructure needs into the future. I would point out that this effort is, along with the various projects I've been mentioning, are very much in line with our planning and infrastructure goal of Sonoma Water's current strategic plan. And lastly, we want to report out that we did recently receive findings from Department of Drinking Water this past October from a comprehensive 2-day sanitary survey inspection of our water supply infrastructure that was conducted in late September, wherein there were 10 DDW staff members that accompanied with Sonoma Water staff that inspected an array of our facilities from our operations room, our SCADA systems, all 6 of our collector wells, all 18 of our storage tanks, our disinfection and corrosion control facilities, our Todd Road well, and 2 other booster pump stations. And we were pleased to see that there were no deficiency findings in the areas of our pumps, system management and operation, monitoring and reporting, or our operator compliance with state requirements. So, and there were only minor deficiency findings on a few of the items that are shown here in the second to last bullet that we'll be addressing. So we viewed that as a good, favorable report. And I thank you for your time, and that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It's always nice to hear how the water department is working and collaborating with the city, so that's great. I'll open it up now for any board member questions or comments. Board member Wright.
Yeah, thank you for that presentation. It's always good to see all the various projects you're doing. I have 2 questions. One is, could you maybe comment, how is your delivery system of your projects? Are you running into the same sort of problems we are here with getting people to design things and build things and contract things? And
Yeah, well, we have our share of challenges. Yeah, I made some reference to equipment delivery, supply chain challenges that we're having. Some of our delivery as to schedule. Some of it comes down to what we can afford to do. Also, I've made reference to budget cycles. We do look at our budgets and what we feel is priority that we can cover with new rates, and sometimes we are having to defer some of the work. At times we have staff resources issues that can affect that cathodic protection project I mentioned. We are currently on our 3rd project manager over the years, and the loss of staff on occasion has adversely affected some of our schedules. So we share some of the challenges in getting projects delivered and moved along.
Okay, and secondly, yeah, you indicated at the very beginning of your presentation that in March, I guess, you're going to come back with more financial information. I'm assuming you must have a capital improvement budget that shows multiple years funding and all that stuff. Is that actually available to see somewhere online or something like that?
As part of the information that we provide to the Finance Subcommittee for the TAC, is the long-range financial plan that shows all these projects projected into the future. That water system master plan that I also made reference to will also help us further populate that. It's relatively well populated into the foreseeable future, particularly in our capital improvement forecast range of 5 years, but hopefully we're working towards getting that better populated into the longer range that we hope that the master plan is going to, we expect the master plan to be able to do that for us.
So you don't actually have a 5-year CIP budget document
We
available?
do. No, we do annually put out a CIP. It publishes along with the county's CIP. I believe we copy the WAC and other committees with that information.
And that inside that document, it shows projects that are funded over multiple years and how they're funded and planned and scheduled and so forth?
It does make reference to the enterprise that is funding the project, and if there's grant funding, that is referenced in there as well.
Okay, I've never been able to find that. I'm not that great at finding things either, so.
Yeah, I'm assuming, yeah. I'm confident we send it to the WAC. I'd be happy to follow up with you, Jennifer, as to seeing where the disconnect is there. But we do send it out to our committees annually.
Right, thank you.
Through the chair, if I might, if you're comfortable, I'm happy to follow up with Sonoma Water and ask to get that document in the next couple of weeks, and I will send it out to the board. So please send that in the next couple of weeks, and we'll send it out to the board. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Vice Chair Arnone?
Oops, structure. I guess you could still hear me. I must be too loud anyway. Now you can hear me better. I guess my question is this the first master plan that Sonoma Water has developed? And if so, what was it using before having a master plan to do its master planning?
Specifically the water transmission system, yeah, we've had no equivalent master plan for the water transmission system that we've had here. Most of our planning is the last major master planning that was done was for the water project many years ago. We track between that planning effort and the current planning effort. Most of our long-range planning for capital projects is reflected in the long-range financial plan that we provide to the WAC and the TAC.
And that includes the CIP budget you were just talking about?
Yes. Well, yes.
Okay. I guess my second question is, the first couple of projects you mentioned had to do with wells that were in the process of being developed or revitalized, and I guess it occurs to me, did the recent court decision impacting the delivery of wells in Sonoma County have any bearing on your ability to complete those projects?
Oh, I don't expect it. I don't expect that it will. There may be more information that we would need to be informed on that, but I'm not aware of that being the case. I understand we'll be allowed to complete those projects.
Okay, thank you.
Board Member Bartholow?
Thank you, Chair Galvin. Thank you for the presentation. Appreciate the information. My question is around security on tank sites, and how the survey inspection found deficiencies on tank sites. So I'm just curious, what kind of security is on those now, and what kinds of things do they expect to happen so that there is no more deficiency?
I'm going to ask that our Assistant General Manager of O&M listen to what I respond to, and if I'm way off, let me know. But my recollection of the findings associated with the security issues at tanks was associated with recommendations with regards to fencing. At the same time, I believe video surveillance, I think, has been discussed. I couldn't tell you that was a finding of the report, though, unless apparently that was a finding of the report. So fencing and video surveillance, as I understand it.
Board Member DeWitt?
Yes, thank you for the very nice presentation in many ways. You mentioned aging infrastructure. Some folks that I've talked with at various spots in the county tell me that they believe there's leaks in the aqueduct. So I'm curious, how often do you check for leaks? And when you find them, do you then make a point of repairing them even if they aren't in your plans?
The answer to your question is yes, we would seek to repair leaks that we are made aware of. The nature of our pipeline is fairly resilient to leaks compared to maybe distribution systems. Most of our system is concrete cylinder pipe or mortar lining coated steel pipe. A lot of welded joints, not all of them. So we don't get a lot of leaks like a distribution system typically might, but occasionally. And oftentimes though, when we get a leak, the shutdown associated with it is a fairly significant effort. So sometimes they take weeks, in some cases months, to plan for the repair if the leak is not, causing emergency damage at the time. But yeah, it's not our position that we leave any sizable leaks running for periods of time. We've had some small leaks that have gone on for extended periods as we do the planning to repair it.
Thank you, sir. One of the reasons I asked that is some years back there was a finding that a leak in the Sebastopol Road sanitary sewer system had created a pollution problem. People who had flushed their dry cleaning fluids and other types of things then mixed with petroleum pollution. So there was a multi-source, multi-polluted aquifer under Roseland up at McMinn Avenue. It was called the McMinn Avenue State Superfund site in the 80s, and the problem lingered into the 90s. People in that area are still concerned about some of the things that are occurring. Is it possible for members of the public to actually contact you and talk about their concerns?
To the extent that it is in reference or has some nexus regarding facilities that we operate and manage, then certainly.
Great, thank you, sir. I know I don't want to be a middle person for someone's questions. Last but not least, when you get these new housing developments that come in that are spread throughout the unincorporated areas that Sonoma Water is responsible for, do you feel that you're getting accurate numbers on the amount of water that's going to be used, and that there's no problem in the sense we can always meet the demand? There's a lot of building going on and everyone says, oh, no problem, we can meet the water needs. But as you mentioned earlier, we've got these problems that go on. I call them the four seasons of California: drought, earthquake, fire, flood. And all of them can have effects upon our water supply. So are you pretty confident that we're able to supply enough water for the build, build, build mentality of what's going to be occurring with the development in the county?
Yeah, our water demands currently are way down, particularly following a recent drought, and particularly compared to historic levels. Our water use efficiency has taken large strides forward in recent years. Our water sales were rather low last year. I think when I started at the water agency some years, well, not right when I started, but we're in excess of 60,000 acre feet per year. And last year we sold 36,000 acre feet. To answer your question, I'm confident we have the water source to provide adequate water supply for.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that, because I'm a water conservation kind of guy from back in the drought in the 70s, and have really been following this approach, and yet the cost of water always goes up. So do you think it'll be going up again this next year?
They're related issues, quite frankly. Sonoma Water's, the way we were funded, we sell our water on a 100% volumetric basis. And the less water we sell, certain fixed costs get divided among a lower volume of water. So the unit price of that water goes up. It's a big challenge for us. Sonoma Water is very much open to reopening the restructured agreement to reconsider how that rate structure is functioning for all parties involved. There is definitely a reason why Sonoma Water's rates have been challenging with the lower sales in water.
Thank you,
although
sir.
we do encourage the continued efficient use of water.
Thank you. I'll stay very conservative and conservationist on water. Appreciate it.
Other board member questions, comments? Anyone from staff? Go right ahead, Jason.
Thank you, Kent. Appreciate the presentation. Just wanted to express appreciation with Sonoma Water for the partnership on getting Southeast Greenway across the finish line. So thank you and your team for getting us to that point, and we can now celebrate putting that in motion.
Absolutely, and thank you for your part.
I have one more question.
Right ahead, board member DeWitt.
This is based a bit on what was just stated. For over decades, actually, we've been working on a thing called the Roseland Creek Bikeway Greenway, and there's a small portion next to McMinn Avenue that's owned by the water agency, and that right-of-way is actually a bit of a linchpin in trying to do a positive project. Have you ever heard of the 2004 Roseland Creek Concept Plan?
I can't say I'm highly familiar with it.
I'd like you to get a copy of it and look at it and then be able to help Roseland for their ideas on what they were calling the Bikeway Greenway and also Southwest Greenway. So what's good for them on the southeast, also good in the southwest. Thank you for your time.
Absolutely.
Any other board member or staff questions or comments? All right, we'll open it up for public comment on item 5.1. If you wish to make a comment, please move to the podium. Seeing no one move, that'll take care of our presentation. Thanks again for being here.
Thank you very much.
Next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes for December the 5th. We'll open it up for public comment on approval of the minutes. Seeing no one rise, the minutes will be approved and entered for December 5th. We have no staff briefing. We have one consent item, item 8.1.
I'll move adoption of the consent calendar.
I'll second.
Motion by Vice Chair Arnone, seconded by Board Member Bartholow to approve the consent calendar. We'll now open it up for public comment on the consent calendar. Seeing no one rise, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Board Member Wright?
Aye.
Board Member DeWitt?
Yes.
Board Member Bartholow?
Yes.
Vice Chair Arnone?
Aye.
Chair Galvin?
Aye.
Okay, let the record reflect the consent calendar passes unanimously with Board Member Badenfort absent.
Thank you. We have 3 items on the report items, so we'll move to item 9.1. Director Burke.
Thank you, Chair Galvin and members of the board. Item 9.1 is a reject all bids, Water Pump Station 9 electrical upgrades, contract number C02438. And Rochella Maeda, Associate Civil Engineer with our Capital Projects team, will be making the presentation.
Good afternoon, Chair Galvin and members of the board. As Director Burke mentioned, my name is Rochella Maeda with the Transportation and Public Works Department. Today, I will present on rejecting all bids for contract C02438 Water Pump Station 9 electrical upgrades. As I will discuss, we received a single bid significantly over the engineer's estimate, so staff is recommending to revise and resolicit the project. I'll start off with a little bit of project background and go over the bid opening results. After the bid opening, we reached out to contractors who we would have expected a bid from but did not receive one from. So I will provide a summary of those conversations and finally end with a recommendation. Water Pump Station 9 is located off of Summerfield Road. On the left, you can see Highway 101 and Hohen Avenue cutting across the top. Those red triangles indicate where the city's water pump stations are located, and then the blue symbols indicate the city's water reservoirs. The purpose of this project is to provide staff with a safe method of de-energizing the facility so they can perform maintenance, replace aging and outdated infrastructure, provide a connection for a redundant and reliable power source during emergencies, and then also provide improvements to enhance general operations and maintenance. Taking a step back and kind of trying to put Station 9 into perspective, you can see it pointed towards the center of your screen. Water Pump Station 9 is the only station that fills water reservoirs R9A and R9B. And together, the station and then the two reservoirs provide water for one of the largest regions in the city, highlighted in green. So this facility is considered a critical piece of infrastructure that needs to have a safe and reliable means for operations and maintenance, especially during emergencies. Under current operations, there is not a safe way for staff to de-energize the entire facility for maintenance, so one of the project components will be installing a PG&E disconnect. There is not currently a reliable method to connect and operate a redundant backup power source for the station, so a new connection would be installed as part of this project for a portable generator. Aging equipment that is close to the end of its useful life, including variable frequency drivers, flow meters, and switchboards, will also be upgraded as part of the project. As part of HVAC improvements, a new air conditioning unit would be installed because the existing one uses refrigerant that's no longer able to be sourced. And then to complete all of this work, a temporary bypass pumping station would be required since the station will need to be taken offline. And this is considered a relatively significant portion of the project because, as you saw, this station feeds a large region within the city, and then it also needs to be monitored 24/7 throughout the majority of construction. We advertised the project on September 23rd of this year and received a single bid on October 15th. That bid amount was approximately $2.9 million, which was about 78% over the engineer's estimate of $1.6 million. Because we only received a single bid for this project, and this is the department's second project going out with a project labor agreement, we decided to conduct informal interviews with the contractors we expected to receive bid from. And because a good portion of the project would be completed by an electrical subcontractor, we also reached out to them for their input. So over the next couple slides, I'll provide the reasons that they provided for not giving us a bid for the project. One of the potential prime bidders stated that the electrical subcontractor that they typically work with did not provide them with a bid for the project. Two cited project labor agreement requirements as one of the reasons for not providing a bid. And one indicated that the majority of work would be completed by a subcontractor. Moving on to the electrical subcontractors, one indicated that they did not have enough time to prepare a bid. Another one indicated that sole source requirements for the project limited their profit margin. One stated that the scope of work was relatively small compared to other projects out for bid at the time. And two cited project labor agreement requirements as one of the reasons for not providing a bid. Ultimately, there are design modifications that can be made that we think can reduce the total project cost without significantly impacting the project objectives. And since the project would need to be revised before rebid, we can implement those design changes and resolicit the project. It is recommended by Santa Rosa Water and the Transportation and Public Works Department that the board, by motion, reject all bids received for contract number C02438, Water Pump Station 9 electrical upgrades. Thank you for your time. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. We also have our design engineer with Brelgy & Rice Consulting Engineers available here if you'd like to address any questions to him.
Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Maeda. I'll open it up for any board member questions or comments. Board member Wright.
Yeah, it seems like there's compounding problems that caused this bid to be extremely high. Of all the things in here, and this is not actually a question, maybe more for the director, can we look into this project labor agreement so that we on the board can understand that and what we can do? It seems like this is not helping us very much in our contracting, and as a board, I'm thinking maybe we should look into it and see if we could make some recommendations to council or something like that. I don't know if we can have a study session on that or do something. I don't know. I don't really know how to proceed, what to do, but this is something that's been kind of bugging me, and this is an opportunity to talk about it.
Chair Galvin, and through the chair, yes, there is an opportunity for us to have further discussions. I've been communicating with the Public Works Director about collecting data from bids. As Rochelle mentioned, we haven't had that many project labor agreement bids go out or come in, and so we're collecting that information so that we can have a cohesive dialogue with council about what changes might need to be made. The challenge we have is there aren't many similarities between the projects that we've gone out to bid with and received comments back to be able to put fingers on specific issues relating to the project labor agreements. And so once we see more projects work their way through and either have issues or have successes, we'll be able to develop a plan to go back and have a conversation with council. But yes, it's on our list of things to collect information on so that we can have a more constructive dialogue with the council in the future.
From my perspective, everything worked fine before we had these project and labor agreements. And so I guess the old adage, if it ain't broken, why fix it? And so anyway, I would like to do something. Do something for the cause. That's it. Thank you.
Through the chair, Chair Galvin, and board members, I'm happy to work with Assistant City Manager Nutt to bring information back to the board when we have a good piece of information. We did do a briefing on project labor agreements prior to the board, and if I'm hearing that a majority of the board would be interested in having an update, I'm seeing some shaking heads, so yes, I'll work with Assistant City Manager Nutt, and it may take us a few months, but we will come back to the board and give an update and determine the best vehicle to do that, whether it be a study session or staff briefing. And if the board has feedback, we can definitely bring that back to council.
That would be great. Thank you. Other board member questions or comments? Board member Bartholomew.
Yes, that would be great. I would love to hear about that. And so the actual specific problems with the requirements are being collected from the different people that you spoke to, I'm assuming, so that can all be taken into consideration.
I'd probably ask capital projects, either if Rochelle would like to answer or if our TPW director would like to come down and answer. As capital projects team is tracking this information, I just don't have the details that they have in terms of tracking the data.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, Chair, Vice Chair, board members. Dan Hennessy, Transportation Public Works Director. Rochelle mentioned this is only the second from the Water Department. We have a number, though, that have gone through for Transportation and Public Works projects. Initially, results were higher but similar to what we had seen in the past. However, the number of bids that we received had decreased significantly. We have continued to see that bid numbers stay pretty low, 1 or 2 per project. And I think that our bidders who are able to put together a bid that is compliant with project labor agreements understand that they are one of only a couple bidders who are able to do so, and we are seeing prices escalate as a result of that. So I am in contact with our administrative team to put together a list of projects that are similar to this before the project labor agreement was in place, so that we see kind of a comparison of the 12 to 18 months before and the 12 to 18 months after. I'll also share that Sonoma County instituted a similar but different project labor agreement that has different standards than ours. and they have not seen much change at all. They are still seeing a number of bidders. They are still seeing bid prices close to their engineers' estimates. And so I think that we can isolate exactly what the difference is. We just need some data, additional data put together to show it. It's tough to do with 2 or 3 data points, and it's hard to sit here and wait for data points 4, 5, and 6 when we likely know what the answer will be. But I think our city council who implemented the project labor agreements is going to want to see that data before they change something that they just implemented. So while frustrating, it's probably a game of patience for us to make sure that we have backup and have collected and put together a story that we can actually tell and be confident in. So I share the frustrations, but I don't see a short-term way out of it.
Thank you, that helps. Board Member DeWitt?
Yes, sir. So I'm curious, did you ask the bidder that did submit with the high bid if it was high because of part of project labor agreements being involved?
Thank you for your question. Yes, we did talk to the contractor that provided that bid, and there was kind of a combination of reasons for their high bid. It varied based on the bid item. A few of them were, he did cite because of the project labor agreement. Others were for a couple of other reasons. For example, the temporary bypass pumping system. We got some different information from manufacturers who would provide the pump during design than our contractor received from those same manufacturers during construction. And so that number was significantly lower in design than we received from the contractor, but not directly attributed to the PLA.
Thank you kindly. I do believe if you're going to have a presentation about PLAs that you try to get as much information as possible and try to have it be as balanced as possible so that it doesn't come in with a predetermined view as to what these things are. It's the kind of thing where you can blame almost any increase in cost on something that you want to say. I appreciate you bringing this forward today, and I'll be supporting staff recommendation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Arnone?
So I'm concerned about the fact that we wanted to have this work done. Obviously, there's some weaknesses that exist that we were trying to address with this, and so I'm concerned about the consequences of delaying this. And that leads me to my question about the fact you mentioned there would be some potential redesigns that you're going to consider that would impact the project and perhaps lower its cost. Do any of the redesigns have any element of addressing the PLA issue? I mean, is there, and part of this is because I'm not quite sure whether there's any flexibility in using PLAs, but are there anything you can do to work around the PLA issue without, without going down the track of a PLA?
Thank you for your question. My understanding is no, there is not a way to go around that at all at this point. So we're looking at other design revisions that are separate from the PLA requirements.
The way around it would be to decrease the engineer's cost estimate by 3/4. So it's not.
So it's purely a number. It's a number. The project cost.
Yeah, it's determined by the engineer's cost estimate or a specific waiver from City Council.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
Assistant City Manager Nutt?
Thank you, Chair Galvin. So there are, within the policy, there are some exemptions based on lack of contractor density or specific reasons why there aren't contractors in our particular area. Our area consists of 5 counties in the North Bay. We have not exercised those exemptions yet. Those exemptions are at the pleasure of the city manager to move forward with those. As we brought that policy to council, there were similar exemptions within a PLA agreement by the Sonoma Valley School District. When they exercised it, they were sued immediately by the trades. And so while we have some tools, we also need to understand that there's the potential for legal action which could further delay a project. And so the conversation we've had with the teams and with the departments is we just need to be very cautious when we choose to make that first decision to exercise an exemption, that there could be other ramifications that come with that particular project. But I wanted you to know that there are exemptions built into the policy. They are very thin and very narrow. But if we feel the need, we will utilize the city manager's authority to move forward with those.
Thank you, that helps. Any other board member questions or comments? Not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move that the Board of Public Utilities by motion reject all bids received for contract number C02438, Water Pump Station 9 electrical upgrades.
We have a motion by Board Member Wright, seconded by Vice Chair Arnone. I'll open it up now for public comment. If you wish to make a comment, please move to the podium. Seeing no one rise, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Board Member Wright?
Aye.
Board Member DeWitt?
Yes.
Board Member Bartholow?
Aye.
Vice Chair Arnone?
Aye.
And Chair Galvin?
Aye.
And that motion passes unanimously with Board Member Badenfort absent.
Thank you. Thank you again for your presentation, and thanks for the clarification, Mr. Hennessy. We'll move now to item 9.2. Director Burke.
Thank you. Our second report item is an ordinance amending sections of Santa Rosa City Code Title 15 Sewers for 2025 to maintain compliance with EPA Industrial Pretreatment Program regulation revisions. And Martin St. George, our environmental compliance supervisor, will be making the presentation.
Okay, then, here we go. Make sure I'm close enough. There we go. Yeah, Chair Galvin, Vice Chair Arnone, esteemed members of the board. It's great to be back after a 5-year hiatus since 2019. I'm Martin St. George, for those of you who don't know me, and I'm here for the ordinance amending sections of Santa Rosa City Code Title 15 Sewers. So, by background, what qualifies a City of Santa Rosa Laguna Treatment Reclamation Facility to be part of an EPA pretreatment program? Well, you have to receive at least 5 million gallons a day for water to be reclaimed. You have to have significant industrial users. Now, there's 2 subcategories under significant industrial users. One's an industry like a food processor or a linen commercial laundry facility that discharges over 25,000 gallons a day. And the other industry that can be categorized as a significant industrial user is a federal category, like a metal finisher as a category, or a chip manufacturer. And we have those in our regional collection system as well. So what does a source control program look like for industrial users? It means they're inspected and they're sampled and they're permitted by a staff, pretreatment staff. Federal and local limits are enforced. The collection crew, as a result, is protected, as well as the staff of the collection system, and the collection system itself is protected. And as well as the sites that the industry sit on, their stormwater concerns are also evaluated and inspected by the environmental compliance inspectors. Also in the pretreatment program is the waste hauling trucks, the trucking that comes in and out of the plant, and also groundwater remediation sites. But we're not talking about that today, and the code that we're talking about today is not impact any of those last 2. So, pretreatment audits. The city's environmental compliance source control program is part of the EPA pretreatment program, the Environmental Protection Agency program. We were approved in 1983. We've been doing this for a while. So the State Water Resources Control Board must do these audits every 5 years or so, and inspect every 1 to 2 years. An inspection is an inspector going out to a site and with an EPA inspector with them, or auditor inspector with them, and they see what our relationship's like with the industrial user. They see what we are evaluating, make sure it's all consistent with the EPA program guidelines, to make sure we're covering everything. That's in an inspection. Then they come back and they look at our files. An audit, on the other hand, they look at the city code, they look at the enforcement response program, and they look at the workflow in the office to make sure we're catching all the industries that should be in the program that are here in the regional system. So that's what an audit looks like. The last one we had was in 2022, and these were some of the findings that we're going over today. So I mentioned the categorical industrial users before. The definition had 3 typos in it. When it was audited and they said, hey, let's get the space out of pretreatment. And the second and the third edits were not consistent with the federal definition of categorical industrial user. So this edit is just to clean up that wording. The second is the section on periodic compliance reports. Users at times will have to hand in reports, and those reports have to meet criteria of the EPA pretreatment program requirements. And we have to have it in our code, city code, that it makes it mandatory for those requirements of the EPA to be levied on the industrial users. So that's why we have to have this code edit to clarify that an industrial user must report their self-monitoring no less than twice per year unless the city performs the sampling and the meter reads. So, and that it needed to be added into the code. It wasn't clear as it was written. And the last one, the last proposed edit, is in record keeping. There's a requirement to document the use of best management practices as a part of record keeping. Some of our industries use best management practices in lieu of pretreatment, as long as they're doing things like capturing waste and hauling it off and saving the receipts that they hauled the waste off, and those sort of things. It's really basic record keeping. It wasn't in the requirements. Our industries have always done it. We've not had a problem with them keeping their records, but it was needed to be clear in the code edits. So that's what that item is. It's the third edit you have in your packet. Without any other further ado, the recommendation. It is recommended by Santa Rosa Water that the Board of Public Utilities, by resolution, recommend that the City Council adopt an ordinance amending sections of Santa Rosa City Code, Title 15, Sewers, 15-04.030, Definitions, 16, 15-08.490, Periodic Compliance Reports, and 15-08.620, Record Keeping.
Thank you, Mr. St. George. I'll open it up.
Thank you.
Board member questions or comments? All right, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move adoption of a resolution of the Board of Public Utilities recommending that the Santa Rosa City Council adopt an ordinance amending sections of Santa Rosa City Code Title 15 Sewers to maintain compliance with EPA Industrial Pretreatment Program Regulation revisions and waive the reading of the text.
I'll second.
Motion by Vice Chair Arnone, seconded by Board Member Bartholow. I'll now open it up for any public comment on item 9.2. See no one rise. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Board Member Wright?
Aye.
Board Member DeWitt?
Aye.
Board Member Bartholow?
Aye.
Vice Chair Arnone?
Aye.
And Chair Galvin?
Aye.
And that passes unanimously with Board Member Board Member Badenfort absent.
Thank you. Thanks again, Mr. St. George.
Thank you. Appreciate your support in this. Thank you.
We'll now move to item 9.3. Director Burke.
Thank you, Chair Galvin and members of the board. Our last report item is our 2024 Water and Wastewater Cost of Service Study and proposed fiscal year 25-26 through fiscal year 29-30 rate schedule. And we will have a few folks presenting. Nick Harvey, our Deputy Director of Administration, as well as Mark Hildebrand with Hildebrand Consulting, Dan Hennessy, our Transportation and Public Works Director, and then also our interim city attorney, Dustin Cooper, will also be taking part in this presentation. I did want to note, I really appreciate the board's patience with me being out at the last board meeting. I was able to be on virtually. I heard all the board's feedback. We really took that to heart, and that helped shape the recommendation in front of you today. So I want to thank the board for all their hard work. And I'm pleased to introduce the team to bring this in front of you today.
Thank you, Director Burke, and good afternoon, Chair Galvin, members of the board. Happy to be before you today to update you on our rate, the latest developments in our rate setting process, and ultimately request your recommendation of the rate recommendations to City Council. In terms of our agenda, shortly after this slide, I will be handing it over to Mark Hildebrand of Hildebrand Consulting, our rate consultant. He'll walk us through the latest revised, go through the objectives and the rate setting process. Then he'll go through the water and wastewater recommendations, which, as you know, is a result of the feedback coming from the study session. The rate recommendations on the water side have been revised. Towards the tail end of that section of the presentation, I'll be handing it over to Dan Hennessy, the TPW Director, to give an update on CIP delivery. Then I will be speaking to you to give an update on our Value of Water campaign and outreach efforts. I will then be handing it over to our attorney, Dustin Cooper, to discuss some new optional Prop 218 procedures related to rate setting that we feel may be advantageous to adopt as part of this rate cycle. And finally, we'll end with a request of our recommendation to City Council.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me again. I'll be going through this presentation. I know that the whole group up in front of me has already seen these slides, so I will take them a little bit quicker than last time in the interest of your time, but please feel free to slow me down if at any point you feel like I'm going over something too quickly, and we can obviously take questions at the end as well. So as we approach this project, there were objectives that we had in mind. The first bullet here, legal compliance, is the most important in my mind. As your rate consultant, I want to make sure that Santa Rosa Water has rates that are fully legally compliant with everything that needs to be addressed in terms of California Constitution and the things that apply. So that's the first priority. And then we also obviously want to make sure that the utilities are financially sufficient, financially sustainable and sufficient, and that we minimize rates on your customers, that your customers understand their bill. When they look at it, they understand what they're paying for, and that we keep the bills as affordable as possible. Next slide. As we go through the cost of service study, rate study, there's three general steps. The first is revenue requirements, which is the same as a financial plan. That's looking at all the existing money coming into the utility and all the expenses going out, and doing a 10-year forecast to understand how much rate revenue do we need and what's our financial strategy for meeting all those costs over the next 10 years. So once we understand how much rate revenue is needed for the utility, we look at your customers to understand how they're using the system so we can allocate costs equitably to the different customers based on how many of those customers there are, how much water or wastewater they produce, the strength of their wastewater, those types of things. So we want to make sure that the bills are equitable to your different customers through the cost of service analysis. And then finally, the rate design is what the bill will look like when they receive that bill at their home. Next slide. So jumping into the recommendations. So jumping to the end, the final recommendations, just to leave any mystery out of the presentation, here are the proposed rate revenue increases that are being proposed for the water and wastewater. So for water, it's 6% for 3 years and then 7% for 2 years. And for wastewater, it would be 5% rate increases for all 5 years. It is important to note that in the first year, because we did the cost of service analysis and the rate structure changes a little bit, the overall revenue being recovered by the utility are these numbers, the 6% and the 5% for water and wastewater respectively. However, results will vary by customer depending on how much water they use, the type of account they have, the size of their meter, because again, the rate design changed, and so those changes will impact different types of customers slightly differently. But overall, that's the amount of revenue that will be generated through the rate revenue. And you can see in the last column there the change in the full utility bill, the combined water and wastewater bill for a typical single-family home for each of those years. Next slide. Here is the financial cash flow forecast for water. The graph has got a lot going on, but the top portion is comparing revenues versus expenses. The green in the background represents revenue, and the blue columns in the foreground represent expenses. And the way to read that graph is anytime that the columns in the background are the same height, you basically have a balanced budget, which is happening in nearly every year. You can see that they're quite matched up over the course of the next 10 years based on the projections that we've made for expenses. And in the middle graph, the line graph, you can see that the projected reserves in the solid blue line is tracking very closely to the targeted reserve levels in the dashed black line, really equal to they're on par at the end of the study there. You will notice that these percentages have changed from the last presentation. We appreciate the feedback that we got, and we were able to take a closer look and run some additional analyses on the proposed rate increases, and we were able to reduce some to make sure that at the end of the 10 years we still remain at the targeted reserve levels. So we do appreciate that feedback. Next slide. When we start talking about cost of service and rate design, what we do is we put different types of costs into different buckets so that we can then turn those into rates. The three main buckets that we looked at are customer costs, which are driven by the existence of an account. This is mostly billing costs and just the cost driven by the existence of accounts, regardless of whether they're a large or small customer. The capacity costs are assigned to customers based on the size of their meter. These are fixed costs that largely have to do with engineering and maintenance and infrastructure, and so the size of a customer's meter is a reflection of the amount of capacity that's needed to serve that customer, and so their capacity costs are driven by the size of their meter. And then finally, the commodity costs are costs that are driven by the amount of water usage that customers use. So that's going to be purchase water costs, electricity, chemicals, and other costs that tend to vary with the use of water. Next slide. So you can see how these costs fall into a little bit more detail as far as fixed versus variable. So the total fixed revenue that we're trying to capture from your fixed costs is 25.8%, and then you can see in the blue the variable revenue through your usage rates will be 74.2%. Next slide. And here is a snapshot of the first year. So you can see current year rates along with the first year proposed rates July of 2025, and the change both in dollars and as a percentage. So you can see that in that change, none of those are 6%. And again, that's because of the cost of service results in variations in how the costs end up in these different recovery mechanisms. And for that reason, it's going to affect different types of customers differently. But the overall rate revenue that will be generated by these changes will be 6% over to the utility as a whole. Next slide. There is something that's being proposed. This is something that existed in the past and that the city got away from and now proposing to reenact, which is a pass-through of Sonoma County Water Agency costs. And you might have noticed from the previous slide, the pie chart, the purchase cost for wholesale water is the single largest line item for the water utility, and that cost can vary quite a bit from year to year. It's hard to get a very clear read on what those percent changes will be from one year to the next, and certainly for the next 5 years, it's really hard to guess what those percent increases are going to be. The problem with trying to guess something that's so impactful, that's such a large part of your costs, is that if you overestimate how much it's going to be, you're going to end up overcharging your customer, and if you underestimate, then you're going to under-recover the cost that you incur. And so the best way to protect both sides and avoid overcharging or undercharging is to pass through that particular cost, and the law does allow you to pass through that particular cost. It's a clause within the Constitution that says that wholesale water costs can be passed through. And so every year, the usage rates will be adjusted in accordance to exactly what Sonoma Water does with its rates. Next slide. This is an example. I won't go through all the math, but it does show that it is rather complicated. We need to be equitable and fair, and unfortunately that requires a bit of complexity that might be challenging for some folks to understand. But this is an example where, as I mentioned before, 2027 for Santa Rosa would have a 6% rate increase for most of its rates. For the Santa Rosa pass-through, we're assuming that they had a 10% increase to their rates. And without going through all the numbers, you can see that in the last column on the right, the change to the rates ends up being a weighted average of the 6 and the 10. Each rate here varies slightly differently because the amount of wholesale water costs within these different rates varies slightly because of how they were structured. But ultimately what will happen is that the Santa Rosa Water will receive notification of that rate adjustment sometime in the spring. We'll do the math and we'll send out a notice to your customers at least 30 days prior to changing the rates every year. Next slide. So jumping over to wastewater, you can see a similar graph in terms of the revenues versus the expenses at the top, and the goal to keep the reserve levels online with the reserve targets. You can see the increase in the reserve target that was probably also shown in the previous slide, that is as a result of implementing a catastrophic reserve target that is recommended to be implemented. That is the product of an engineering study that was conducted, and so we are targeting those reserve levels going forward. Next slide. Same cost allocation principles for wastewater. In this case, it's customer costs, capacity costs, again, both based per meter and per meter size. The wastewater treatment cost is based on flows, but it's also based on strength. So customers that have higher strength sewage will receive a higher rate because it does cost more to treat higher strength sewage. Next slide. And here's the pie chart showing the fixed versus variable revenue. In this case, the variable revenue through your usage charges will be 69.8% versus fixed revenue of 30.2%. Next slide. For a comparison of the current rates versus the proposed rates for the first year, and again, the percent changes are slightly different than the 5% that's being proposed, but overall will produce 5% increase in revenue. I went through the different rate schedules pretty quickly because it's hard for most folks to look at those and understand how it's going to impact them. But this slide is really helpful for customers to look at to see how they're going to be impacted by these proposed rate increases. What this says is a bill impact analysis, and if you look down the left column, you can see different types of customers. So I'll focus on the first group, single-family residential. We have low water users, median water users, high water users, and very high water users. And you can see what their current water and wastewater bill looks like with that level of water usage, what the proposed rates will look like on a monthly basis for them, and the overall change in their bill, both in dollars and percentages at the end. So you can see quite a bit of equity between the customers. You know, the lowest percentage there is a 4.9 and the highest is a 7.1. Again, that's a product of the cost of service analysis. That's only a phenomenon for the first year. After that, everyone will get exactly the same percent increases. But To be honest, in terms of the high versus the low there, that's a pretty good outcome. A lot of cost of service studies result in a lot more variability that's harder to explain, but that's a pretty even distribution of impacts to your customers. Next slide. This is a survey of other local agencies that provide both water and wastewater services. So this is the combined monthly bill. Currently, Santa Rosa is in the bottom, I would call that the bottom of the middle of the pack. And with the proposed rate increases for year one, I'd say you're in the middle of the pack. So to be honest, as a rate consultant, it's good to be in the middle. Lots of times when you're at the bottom, it's an indication that you're underinvesting in infrastructure. That's the way that you can save costs, is kicking the can down the road and not proactively addressing aging infrastructure. And that's only going to come back and be more expensive for your ratepayers in the long term. So having a proactive capital investment program is really important part of providing reliable and affordable rates. Next slide. So you saw this slide earlier. Again, a recap of the rate adjustments that are being proposed for water and wastewater and the impact that it will have on single-family bills. And I believe that's it.
Yeah, thanks. Go ahead and to the next slide, please, Nick. This is essentially a same slide that you saw 2 weeks ago when we talked, but I wanted to address some of the specific questions and feedback from the existing project management firms that I talked to and a couple of other consultants who are interested in being part of this program moving forward. From the existing PM firms that we had, there are really two issues with using that right now for the problems that we have. Well, one, as Assistant City Manager Nutt mentioned last time, that a previous version of that received 0 responses, and it was redone to change the scale of the program a little bit and get some responses. That specific contract is tailored very much to our regional projects and to use for the treatment plant, and that has been how it has been utilized. One of the consultants also that I mentioned when I talked about our conversation last time and mentioned the scale of the program that we're thinking about moving forward, I asked, could you do this under the existing contract, and kind of laughed and said, sure, if you added a 0 to our contract, we would be happy to perform those services for you at that. And that kind of, both consultants kind of said the same thing. It's about the ability to project moving forward, both in terms of the longevity of the contract and the scale of the contract, that would excite more consultants to pursue it. We have a couple of others who have expressed interest in how exactly we're going to implement this and have committed to providing proposals. So I just want to provide a little bit of feedback in the due diligence that we did, especially after Board Member Wright's comments last time and some of the follow-up that we had. That said, I do think there's a couple of changes that we'll make based on those comments. One is that the RFP for the program management can be advanced before the adoption of the rates, noting that it's uncertain and that's subject to change, but I do think that will advance some of this. There are also elements of those existing contracts that we can use to reduce some of the backlog of the existing. It won't be to the scale that we want. It will essentially put a dent in the program, but it'll reduce the burden on the next contract moving forward. So I do want to note that I appreciated the feedback last time and tried to find ways to move some things forward faster than we're currently doing. But the one thing that I did hear was from both the existing firms and the two others that I spoke with said, you have to do something drastically different to make this kind of investment in your water and wastewater networks and systems, because you just don't have the capacity based on how things currently operate and based on the capacity of your staff. It's great to have the resources and the money, but based on what we experience from other jurisdictions around the Bay Area, you need to think about this differently. So it was nice to hear that confirmation, but also to be pressed on it a little bit to try to do things faster and not wait and have all our T's crossed and I's dotted before we move forward. So I'm happy again to answer more questions about that later and take any more ideas, because I learned quite a bit from our conversation last time, and I'm willing to do whatever we can to make sure that these investments are made and reflected in for the community members and don't sit in a bank account somewhere. So thank you. Nick?
Okay, as an update to our Value of Water campaign, we're currently in the second phase of the outreach plan that's running from now through July 2025, which is focusing on the proposed rates, the Prop 218 noticing, and the adopted rate schedule. We've been working very hard behind the scenes to get the ball rolling on the Prop 218 process, the noticing process that is. And we're using several media for these efforts, srcity.org/value of water, City Connections e-newsletter, and a variety of other print and media resources. As part of our Value of Water campaign, we're running digital ads through Google, and we've been running social media campaign through Facebook and Instagram, and we have received about 660,000 impressions between those two efforts. And with that, I will hand it over to our attorney, Mr. Cooper.
Good afternoon, Board. So there are two significant changes in Proposition 218 law since you last did a rate setting process. But before I get to those two new laws, can we go back to the slide, please?
Hold on one second, Interim Assistant City Attorney. We're getting the slides back up in front of you, so hold on one second. Can you see the slides now?
I cannot. I have the slides on my computer. Would someone just like to tell me what slide number we're on?
We can do that. Nick, would you please assist with that?
Yeah, Dustin, we're on slide 26, the legal requirements for setting water rates in California.
Okay, thank you. So we have two new significant changes in Proposition 218 law since your last rate setting process. But before we get to those, slide 26 is a summary of the specific portion of Proposition 218 that applies to the proposed rate change we're discussing today. Proposition 218 was passed in 1996, and this language is a pretty good summary of what Article 13D, Section 6 requires. For example, revenues shall not exceed the funds required to provide the service, etc. So while these words seem pretty straightforward on paper, in practice since 1996, there has been an extensive amount of litigation over the meaning of Proposition 218, and then more recently, very significant challenges to public agencies' Proposition 218 processes, including a fairly recent development by the plaintiff's bar to certify classes. So these are class action lawsuits against public agencies challenging rates. So there's been an extensive litigation history associated with rate changes under Proposition 218. And then more recently, the plaintiff's bar has been very active in class action lawsuits challenging rate setting processes. Next slide. So that's the backdrop for two new provisions in Proposition 218 law. The first is contained in Government Code Section 53579, which went into effect in 2022. And this, in my mind, is an absolute no-brainer. It provides for a 120-day statute of limitations period for an objecting party to challenge your new rates. The catch, so to speak, is it requires language that, to that effect, be contained in your notice that will be issued to the public. Next slide. The second, more recent change in Proposition 218 law it adds an exhaustion of administrative remedies. And actually, this is a brand new statute that goes into effect January 1st of 2025. So as of this moment in time, it is actually not in effect, but will be on January 1st. Let me take a step back and just explain what exhaustion of administrative remedies is. It is a fairly common legal construct in other settings. It is new to Proposition 218. But basically what it requires is that an objecting party, in order to have legal standing to then potentially bring an action challenging your rate setting process, they have to identify in writing with a level of specificity the specific legal objections that they have. And obviously the advantage is that we get to see those written objections, and then we can potentially change course, or we could provide written responses, amendments, and so on. But we get to see that prior to the conclusion of the rate setting process, and then, you know, as I mentioned, we can change course as necessary. So the benefit to this is that it substantially reduces the legal risk that has increased over the years regarding Proposition 218. One of the downsides, a couple actually. First is this is obviously a brand new law. We will be, should we continue down this path and implement it, we will be one of the first, if not the first, public agencies to implement this new process. There's also a communication challenge because the exhaustion requirement will require an interim deadline. So when the notice is issued, there's a minimum 45-day period by which written objections can be lodged, and the written objection would then, to the extent it is lodged, satisfy an exhaustion requirement. And then after that minimum 45-day written objection deadline, there would be another deadline by which customers could provide a written protest, and that would be the same day where we would conduct, the council would conduct a public hearing. So again, there's a communication challenge because there's two separate deadlines, and there's a written objection opportunity and then a written protest opportunity. So, you know, since we're going to be one of the first in California to potentially utilize this new exhaustion opportunity, we're just going to need to be careful in how we communicate this and do so as clearly as possible. Next slide. So these are optional procedures, that is the statute of limitations notice and then the exhaustion of administrative remedies requirement. So technically we do not have to implement them if we do not want to. As I mentioned earlier, the statute of limitations language is an absolute no-brainer, very easy to implement. The exhaustion, you know, may require a little more discussion. You may have some questions. But at the end of the day, my recommendation, and I believe Director Burke's recommendation, is that we proceed with both optional procedures. If we were to pursue the exhaustion requirement, it would be detailed in the public notice that would go to customers. The objection deadline would be February 28th. We would then review any written objections that come in that are timely, and then we would respond in writing, make adjustments to our analyses, et cetera, in response to the written objections. And then ultimately the council will consider a resolution formally responding to those written objections on April 1st. And as noted, that would be a separate item prior to the protest hearing and potential adoption of rates, which would also occur on April 1st. Next slide. pass it back to you, Nick.
Thank you. Okay, so in terms of the remaining tentative schedule for the rate setting process, we are still planning to be at study session at City Council on January 7th. The Prop 218 notifications mailing, we're hoping to get those postmarked by January 13th, but given the complexities inherent in introducing the two items Mr. Cooper just spoke to, as well as the reintroduction of the pass-through provision for Sonoma water costs, it may be challenging to make that. Good news is, if we have to push it back a bit, we should still have plenty of time for our 45-day deadline prior to public hearing. And our public hearing, which may also move depending on how the Prop 218 notification process goes and the timing of that, but we're tentatively scheduled for April 1st. So with that, it is recommended by the Board of Public Utilities Budget Subcommittee and Santa Rosa Water that the Board of Public Utilities, by resolution, recommend that after compliance with Proposition 218 and successful conclusion of a protest hearing, that the City Council, 1, enact increased rates for water services, and 2, enact increased rates for wastewater services. And we're happy to address any questions.
Thank you to all four of you for your presentation. I'll open it up for board member questions or comments. Board member DeWitt.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. You mentioned the value of water campaign, and any type of marketing campaign like that, I think should become more clear for the customers so that they will understand why their water conservation measures actually lead to increased costs. Most folks I know don't understand that. That's something that's not intuitive to most people. To most of the folks involved here, because they're policy people, they understand what's going on. But the general person out there in the public that's washing their car, doing all kinds of things that don't really have water conservation in mind, this would be a great time to explain to them what's going on, and then hopefully make it an annual situation, because as we saw here, the rates are going to go up every year, and it's been successful. I've been told that we're using less water. So somehow get that value of water campaign information more, I guess you might say, simplified to the regular person out there who is at their house saving water. I actually know people that use buckets in their shower, put the water in the toilet, and do all types of conservation type things, and then say, wow, why am I paying more? So somehow you guys explain that to them. Thank you kindly.
Other board member questions or comments? Vice Chair Arnone.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank Hildebrand Consulting and all the staff for the fact that sometimes you feel like you're sitting up here and all these people know more about this stuff than you do, and so it's a little bit intimidating to question things, but having people listen to what you're asking and explain it in simpler terms and then make adjustments based on what you've said is really appreciated. So I think this is one of those situations where the ratepayers in our city are going to benefit from the fact that you all listened, and I very much want to express my appreciation for that also. So on the issue of delivery of projects, I'm concerned that our previous discussion about PLAs are going to play into this whole issue, and I didn't see any reference to that. And as we look for ways to try to expedite delivery of projects, I guess one thing I'm not sure of, do PLAs apply to all of the water department contracts as well? I mean, so all of our projects have to go through PLAs. Okay, so that's a yes. So if that's the case, then I think it heightens the importance to gather the data that you talked about gathering right now, and be able to make an intelligent assessment about whether changes are needed or not. And unfortunately, that may end up in having to also deal with some delays in delivering projects. But I know that there's a system we have to go through to make any adjustments, and I think this just heightens the importance of being expeditious in analyzing the situation. And then finally, on the 218 options, I think they're both very appropriate, and that I'm glad we're taking advantage of them. With regard to the exhaustion of remedies, I think that's a great, even though it may add some procedural complexities, it's a great opportunity to avoid disputes and avoid litigation, because you get the people exchanging information and talking to each other, and that's likely to minimize the number of times that you can't figure out some solution other than litigation. So I'm in favor of all those, both of those options being adopted too. So thank you again.
Board Member Wright?
Yes, I'd like to echo Mr. Arnone's comments, or Vice Chair Arnone, excuse me. And I must say, when I opened my agenda packet Monday or whenever it was, and I saw the presentation and the staff report, I was very happy to see that what you've done, and that you significantly changed the rates the first couple of years, and brought us right down to working right on top of our our balanced budget. Yeah, working on top of that dotted line there. That's what I want to say. I don't know exactly what that's called. And also, thank you, Director Hennessy, for following up on my comments, and I hope you will continue to do so. And from my experiences, you just got to keep pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing on this kind of stuff, and then eventually things move. But anyway, thank you very much.
Board Member Bartholow?
Thank you, Chair Galvin. I'd like to third Vice Chair Arnone's comments and second Mr. Wright's comments. I really appreciate the consideration and responsiveness from the comments, both at the Budget Subcommittee and the last BPU meeting. It's, when I opened the packet too, I was really happy. I got really excited to see that 6% instead of 8 or even 7, and that it worked out to, do what we're trying to do here, which is create a sustainable plan for the agency and also keep the rates as low as we can. So bravo. With regard to getting projects done, I really appreciate your consideration as well. And I just think, perception counts for a lot, and getting projects done is very positive, positively perceived by the public. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I certainly want to commend staff and our consultants for all the hard work that you put into getting us to this point, and also to the Budget Subcommittee for all the work that they did to challenge, I think, our consultants and our staff to do the best they could to keep the rates low. So as far as the two options that are being recommended on the 218 notices, I fully support those as well. And so, unless there's other further comments, I'll entertain a motion. Yes, the resolution, sorry.
I'll move adoption of a resolution of the Board of Public Utilities recommending that the Council of the City of Santa Rosa enact increased charges and rates for water and wastewater services and waive the reading of the text.
I'll second.
Motion by Vice Chair Arnone, seconded by Board Member Wright. At this time, we'll open it up for public comment on item 9.3. If you wish to make a comment, please move to the podium. Seeing no one rise, may we have a roll call, please?
Board Member Wright?
Aye.
Board Member DeWitt?
Yes.
Board Member Bartholow?
Aye.
Vice Chair Arnone?
Aye.
And Chair Galvin?
Aye.
And that passes unanimously with Board Member Badenfort absent.
Very good. That takes care of items 9.1 through 9.3. We'll now move to public comments on non-agenda matters. If you wish to make a public comment on non-agenda matters, please move to the podium. Seeing none. We have no referrals. We have no written communications. I don't believe we have any subcommittee reports. Any board member reports? All right. We'll move then to the director's report. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, Board Member DeWitt.
Yes, I wanted to ask when we'll be having a meeting of the Water Conservation Subcommittee, please.
Board Member DeWitt, we are postponing in consultation with the chair, scheduling Water Conservation Subcommittee because we are down a full board. We're awaiting a appointment by Councilmember Fleming, and then we're awaiting appointment of the all newly appointed or newly elected council members. We just don't have a committee assignments filled out. So in consultation with the chair, we had discussed once we find out who those new appointments are, the chair will make new subcommittee appointments, and then we will schedule Water Conservation Subcommittee. Likely will be in maybe February.
Thank you kindly.
Now we'll move to the director's report. Thank you. Oh, any public comment on the board member report? Please move to the podium. See no one. Thank you. That'll take care of the board member reports. Now we'll go to the director's report.
Thank you very much, Chair Galvin and members of the board. Again, I do want to echo just my gratitude and thank the board for their hard work and the budget subcommittee for their hard work on the rates. This was a big undertaking, and we really appreciate your leadership. I wanted to update the board on a couple of things. First, I just wanted to let the board know at the last BPU meeting during the recycled water update, there was a comment that we might be looking to discharge, and we are continuing to follow that very closely. As of earlier this week, we were a little over 840 million gallons in storage, which is very high for us for this time of year. And based on the weather forecast with more storms coming forward, we're anticipating that we're probably going to be close to 1 billion gallons in storage. All of the operations teams at the plant, as well as the environmental staff support, as well as our lab support, have been meeting and planning, and we are anticipating that we may be discharging right after the new year, so likely in January. I'll keep the board informed as this goes along. As you are well aware, this is a very routine and normal part of what we do, but it is very staff intensive, and so we have to make sure we're prepared. We are maximizing flows to the geysers as well right now, and as you may also be aware, thanks to the board's support, we were able to get a big contract in place with Sonoma Water to purchase significant phosphorus credits. So we anticipate we should be in very good shape in terms of phosphorus credits when likely we do discharge in early January. So wanted to let the board know we're very much in preparation, and we'll keep you informed. Second, I wanted to just take a moment to talk about one of our long-term employees, unfortunately retiring. So Chris Kilgore, who is one of our utility systems supervisors, will be retiring next week on the 27th. Chris started with the city in 2006, and he was promoted to a senior utility system operator in 2015. He really has exceptional work ethic, and he has earned everyone's respect. He was promoted because of that work ethic to a utility system supervisor in February of 2018. He possesses numerous licenses for the department. And I just want to note that Chris has always put forth a can-do attitude. He's been an excellent coach and mentor. He can always be counted on to respond to any emergency day or night, and there was no task that any of the management staff had any concerns about assigning to Chris, knowing it will be completely accomplished and managed with the highest degree of skill. When given options to solve a work-related problem, Chris would always say what is best for the organization, and we could always count on him to uphold high standards. And so I want to wish Chris the very best in a very well-deserved retirement. Just thank you for letting me speak a little bit about Chris Kilgore. And then last, I just wanted to take a moment to wish the board, you and yours, a very happy holiday. And that is my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or comments from the board? All right, we'll open it up for public comment on item number 15. If you wish to make a comment, please move to the podium. Seeing no one move, that'll take care of that item, and that'll take care of our agenda. I too want to wish all the board and staff and your families a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. I believe we're canceling the January 2nd meeting, so we'll see you in mid-January. And we'll go ahead and adjourn for the year, and we'll adjourn this meeting in honor of Chris Kilgore and his new retirement coming up. So we are adjourned.